All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Happy Saturday afternoon. Um, and welcome to today's event. My name is Jenny. I'm one of the co-owners of Mysterious Galaxy, and I'm so excited for today's event. I keep trying to say tonight, and it's really not nighttime yet. But tonight to celebrate the release of Redemptor, the sequel to Raybearer, one of my absolute favorite books of 2020. And of course, two of the most beautiful covers ever known to man. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to celebrate. So I'm going to kind of give brief, lay of the land and then some introductions, and I will let our two wonderful authors do their thing and take it away. To the right of your screen, you will see the chat section. Feel free to share any love for our authors there, gush over anything and everything, the beauty of the cover, the wonderful twists that happen, and exciting things that you love about the book, essentially. Below us, you can see in that green kind of button how to order a personalized bookplate for Redemptor, and books by either of our authors from Mysterious Galaxy. And then below that and slightly to the right, you'll see the Ask a Question button. Someone has already dropped a question there. As Kwame pointed out on. I will admit, I did not ask the question, but it's a question I want to know too, because I remember a bit about hearing about the cover for Raybearer, and I wanted to know more about how it transitioned to Redemptor too. So please drop all those questions that you have burning on the tip of your tongue there, and our authors will answer them in time. And now to the main event. Today, as I noticed, is celebrating Redemptor. I'm going to just keep holding it up because it's so pretty. We are celebrating Redemptor, which is by Jordan Ifueko. She is the Nebula finalist and the New York Times bestseller of the Raybearer duology and other stories. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband. They have the cutest dog ever. It's the cutest little thing. It's like a cuter version of one of my dogs. Like, she's so much cuter than Tonka. So highly recommend those Instagram follows. And joining her today is Kwame Mbalia. Kwame is the author of another favorite Mysterious Galaxy series, Tristan Strong. Tristan Strong punches a hole in the sky. The next one is Destroys the World and then Keeps Punching, all of which are wonderful. He's also the editor of Black Boy Joy, which came out earlier this month and includes short stories from so many more Mysterious Galaxy favorite authors. It's just like a lot of staff picks are like everywhere right now, in front of me, in the books, all over the place. And with that note, I'm going to exit and leave it to our authors because they are far more interesting than me. And take it away.
Thanks so much, Jenny.
I hope that as Jenny closed out and like turned to look, like her dog was right there, just like staring at her, like they're a cuter version of moi. Excuse me.
Okay.
So I hope that awkward eye contact happened and manifested at some point, because that would be absolutely hilarious.
Yes, and she gave a kinder description of my dog than is in my bio introduction. My bio specifically says that Reggie is a three-legged Trustafarian dog, as in a dog who is extremely privileged, but pretends he just has like the hard life and that he's down, and not that he doesn't have like 4 plush beds and all that. Yeah.
your dog is definitely spoiled.
Yes.
Absolutely spoiled. Speaking of tiny creatures that try to eat things that they're not supposed to, I got sent the most fantastic package, like the most wonderful package, and I opened it up and it was like, Raybearer. I was like, it comes with the brilliant, little thing inside of it. And I was like, behold what was coming. It actually came and was delivered to my house. It is Redemptor. It was awesome. And then this fell out.
Oh.
And what we recently found out, that the tiniest Mbalia in my household loves? Noodles.
Oh no!
Do you know what this looks like? Anyway, this goes on the highest shelf in my office.
I thought that it would be many years before Tiny Mbalia could enjoy my storytelling, but I feel like he's just getting an early literal taste.
He devoured it, just hands down. He said 10 out of 10 fingers. It was fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's very strange to be at an in-person convention. It's really great to see how it just, people have been bursting at the seams to get to like go nerd out over anything in person. So yeah, lots of really great people. Like I mentioned before, my only negative experience currently is that apparently Washington, D.C., which I haven't visited before, got an inburst of oak mites after the cicadas came back. And so I promise you, I have not been outside except in this small walk, like it's 2 minutes, I swear, between this hotel and the convention center. And there are these beautiful oak trees, which meant that these sprites of evil just kind of descended onto my body. And so I've been trying not to
just claw
all day, like during panels even, like just trying not to like go really cave woman. But besides that, hey, books. It's great. Yeah.
I listen for this entire conversation that we're gonna have. Like, I want to treat it like it is that there are a bunch of little baby Jordans out there, baby aspiring writers out there, and they're like, they want to pick your brain and they want to figure out, because they're inspired by you, by your lush, vivid writing and your world building and your characters and their relationships. We're going to talk about Sanjit, just because that is one of my personal favorite characters, and the relationship that he has with Tarisai. And so, but yeah, I just wanted to like really vibe and talk about writing, because I feel like we don't really get to just, talk about the craft of just writing in these stories and everything that kind of goes into it. So if you're good, if you're down with that, I am going to have a Q&A with Jordan to try and learn some of the mastery and wizardry that you have been exhibiting in your story. So are you cool? You cool with that?
I'm pretty cool with that. I kind of expected this to be mostly a session of me fangirling over the characters in Tristan Strong and
nonsense. Nope.
Really
nonsense.
Story about Gum Baby's past and basic questions. But I guess we can do a Q&A, I guess.
So first of all, like, what was it like writing Redemptor amidst everything, but specifically amidst the praise and the reception, the wondrous reception that Raybearer got? Like, what was it like trying to follow that up?
It was extremely difficult. I think even without the external factors of the pandemic and Raybearer's pub date getting moved and state-sanctioned violence against protesters and everything else going on while I was trying to finish this book, it would have been difficult. And I had it easy. Like, I didn't have it easy, but compared to what could have happened, like if Raybearer hadn't had such an overwhelmingly warm reception, people were really, really kind. A lot of people really loved it. And even those expectations were so scary. Because if you write a book that someone says they love and is now their new favorite, then it's just like you feel like you can only go down from here. And I know people who wrote books that I love that didn't get as warm receptions. I still have no idea why. And yet they still just kept writing, kept pumping out books. And I'm just like, if I respond this way to all of this positive feedback, like, with this kind of pressure, how much worse must it be if you had kind of a lukewarm reception, or if, your publisher just didn't push your book that much and so not a lot of people knew about it. And so while this isn't the question you asked, I do think that one thing I keep emphasizing in all of my events to all of the aspiring young writers out there is that it's wonderful to acknowledge your love for writing, but I've yet, and like to take pride in it and to own the fact that you do and you can and you should, but I've yet to meet a single person who it helped to intertwine their identity with being a writer. Because the moment you do that, if you have days you can't write because you're anxious, because you're busy, because you're going through things, then it's not just that you didn't get to write, it's that you're a fraud. Because if you have your identity wrapped up with being a writer, then when you don't write, then you're not real anymore. Like your whole identity is threatened and the foundation is shaken. And that happened to me. That's one of the reasons why this was so hard to write, is because not only had I like wrapped my identity in this, I had all that reinforcement from actually having a book out already. And so with all of those factors and mental health issues, that made it difficult. But all that, you know, it's negative and stressful and stuff, I am so proud of this book. It ended up being a book that I didn't expect it to write. I expected it to be kind of this, you know, sprawling romp across all of these different realms in the world, Atari-Sai visiting monarchs and trying to convince them to join her council. And instead it ended up being this introspective, kind of moody, murky book of this heroine trying to not only navigate her way through the physical world, but also through the like increasingly twisting labyrinth of her own mind and her anxieties and her identity doubts and her self-isolation, which is because of the spirit in which, or the circumstances in which I was writing it. So yeah, that's a little bit of what it was like.
So let's dig into that a little bit with, you know, go into some of the nuts and bolts of what you're talking about, because you had your own expectations of what the book would be like. And then you get into it and you start writing it and it changes and it morphs into this different version that you end up falling in love with, and maybe even, dare I say, becoming a better book than what you had, you know, originally expected to produce, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you, you know, Jordan has placed on her, do you wear a writing hat or do you wear a writing crown? I just imagine you have like 12 different versions of that crown, and there's like your writing crown, there's your dog walking crown, there's like the laundry crown, like.
I'm thinking of adopting that lifestyle. Anyone who follows me on Twitter might have seen like what I posted about my tour. There's this awesome baby there, a baby from my church named Sebastian, and he's just starting to talk. And so I was wearing, you know, this big crown that he was really into, and he kept pointing and saying, "Jordan, Jordan." I was like, "Yeah, hi, Sebastian." And then I took it off for a second, and then I like turned to him later. I was like, "Hey, yeah, it's me, Jordan." And he just said, "No."
It's the Clark Kent Superman glasses effect. Exactly. It's like
you are not
the crown on. Mm-hmm.
I've never seen you in my life. Like, yeah. So I think I'm gonna have to maybe incorporate this into my wardrobe more.
So you sit down, you put on your writing crown, which I'm imagining is bedazzled with like emeralds and sapphires. You sit down, you put on your writing crown. How are you attempting to dive into this story, right? Like you have a world that you've built, right? So it's less about initially the world building in the book and more about, you know, picking up the story and trying to capture, you know, that emotional energy that you left off in book one with. So how are you sitting down, you know, and take us back in time. You're sitting down at your writing station that we'll talk about later. You're sitting down at your writing station and you start doing what when you launch into writing Redemptor?
Panicking. Because
okay, yes. She switches up the writing crown for the panic crown. All right.
Yes, exactly. For my like security Afro bonnet. just covered in kente cloth. I'm just like, okay, this is a safe space. Starting writing every day is the hardest thing for me every single day. It doesn't get easier. Once I get into writing, that I can get into this flow and it's great. And I feel like I'll start like pacing anxiously, but in a good way. Like when I get a good idea, I have to get up and like I kind of have to like clean about the idea, like put something away because I'm so excited about it. But starting is actually really, really hard. And I have to, like without even thinking about it, I'll start avoiding the actual task. Like, hey, maybe I need to check my email and maybe I need to do this and that, until I like one thing having a therapist has been great for is getting to like kind of look at yourself like a third party and objectively tell yourself what you're doing. Like you're avoiding starting writing. You do this every day. It's not going to get scarier than it was yesterday. It stops being scary once you start. So that's my like everyday thing I have to tell myself. Which has gotten worse since being published, actually. Because, I started Ray Bear when I was 13. And while sometimes, I had to like kind of get myself to start, there were so fewer stakes because it was just me, right? Nobody had seen it. In terms of world building, I actually feel like while I didn't have to do quite as much world building for Redemptor as I did with Ray Bear, I still had to do tons. And it was fun. It was overwhelming, but it was fun because with Ray Bear, the book starts when Tarisai is a child. And while she's getting to see the Empire for the first time, she's also just getting to see the world period for the first time. She's been isolated in this magically hidden manner. And so she's just as impressed by seeing, say, like a beach as she is by seeing, these massive palatial structures in different districts of the city. Whereas in this story, she's a young adult. She's 17 at the beginning of the book. And so I had to delve into what the political and economic and class structures of this world are, because now these are the kind of things she would notice. And it was so fun because cities are so fascinating, like really old cities. And while it was hard to get more research on West African pre-colonial cities, of which there were so many, as I'm sure like the Yoruba Empire was big and grand and had these crazy intricate trading systems and customs and irrigation systems. Like there's so much research I did that didn't make it into the book because it wasn't quite relevant. But also she interacts with these monarchs from other realms too. So even though she's only interacting with them briefly, I had to do research on the cultures on which the real world cultures on which they were loosely based. And so little of that research makes it into the book because there are 11 of them. But one thing I'd like to highlight, I had to cut chapters and chapters when Tarisai gets to visit Quetzala, which is loosely based on the grandly elaborate Mayan cities of, like the pre-1300s. I don't know, that like some of them, like it's a little bit uncertain what age they're from because we have to go off ruins and stuff. But the king of Quetzala, King Uxmal, he literally has like a grill of jewels because that was one of the coolest things that I got to research, is that like wealthy ancient Mayans would like implant jewels into their teeth. So just little details like that are really fun to research and sneak in.
Do you find, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but do you find the research part of writing to be as fun, if not more fun, than the process of, creating your story to base off of that research?
I think the excitement I get from learning something that I know I'm going to put into the book is the most fun part. I don't know if like the actual process of like getting a JSTOR subscription and trying to like crawl through articles that aren't ridiculously racist and colonial about the place where I came from is very fun. But then when you get small things, like sometimes you have to even use those articles because that's what's available. Like I can talk to my parents and grandparents who grew up there, but like, they were just living their lives. They're not going to be experts on like what this region of Nigeria was like in pre-colonial days. So even when you use some of those resources, you can, if you just kind of like look objectively at what they were observing and recording and ignore their like racist observations about it, like you still get to learn these really cool things. Like I'm pretty sure it's just in Redemptor, a storyteller like makes a sound in her mouth. And she says, like, I have three bells in my life. I do not tell a lie. And that's like something they did to basically show that like certain people in a region of, I forget what tribe. I think it was the Yoruba, but it might have been a more minor one. To like basically show that they don't have any lies in their mouth. They have to like click to show like, hey, like it's resonating. There's nothing in here but the truth, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, fun things like that I'm just like, how you just know it's the tip of the iceberg. You just wonder like how many cool things, fun things, cute things like that am I missing out on just because we don't have record of it due to,
how do you deal with that? Because that's it is. I don't even know how to really phrase the question other than to say that I've run into the same thing, right? Where we are looking for record and history, right? Mm-hmm. Narrative stories, even fictional and non-fictional, about non-Western areas of the world, right? And they are either, in some really remote location or in some private library or trapped in one of the two still living local indigenous folk from that area who got this got the histories like a griot, got the histories from it was passed down to them. How do you reconcile that, knowing that you mentioned JSTOR? I'm looking at my bookshelf right now when I was doing research on Mali, on the Malian Empire, and like how many books are not actually written by anyone from that region. And you're like, what is being filtered out by looking through the gaze that has written this book? Like, how do you, is that something that consistently bugs you?
Yes. And something, one of the most frustrating things, actually try not to think about it too much because it'll make me mad. But I recently found out when I was doing research for a comic I wrote for Jim Henson. Jim Henson's The Storytellers. I wrote a comic about the god Eshu and a village girl who tricks the trickster god. That there are West African stories, like ancient stories and mythologies, that get retroactively changed, not just erased, but changed due to colonial values that are introduced later. Like the original origin story, like of creation, one of them, I know there are like so many in different versions because that's the way mythologies work. Basically, Olorun, the sky god, sends down all of his, like some of his minor Orisha to create the world. And in the original story, the male spirits keep blocking out Oshun, the river goddess who's trying to like bring life to the world, and they keep trying to create it by themselves, and it doesn't work until they let Oshun and her Iyame Aje help them. And it's this beautiful story talking about how like we have to have union, we have to have you can't just have the men do everything, you have to have men and women, and that's the only way the world flourishes. And it got changed later after colonization and patriarchal roles were introduced and were prevalent to say that actually Oshun kept meddling and not doing it right. And the world didn't flourish until she submitted to the commands of the male minor gods. And then the world was able to work. And I'm just like, that's an infuriating story by any measurement. But I guess what's so frustrating is like, you expect colonial stories to introduce their own narratives that replace the old ones, right? You don't expect them to twist and poison the beautiful stories that are already there. I mean, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was just like, why would you do that? Like, it's just, Yeah, and it just makes you wonder how many other things that we'll never know have been, just like poisoned, really. But anyway, this is a happy event and a happy time, and we're not going to go down.
No, we're gonna get angry.
Yeah.
So one thing that to harken back to Raybearer, one thing that I expected to happen in the book, but then didn't, or was and you could possibly speak on this, was subverted, was the idea of a love triangle. And that I thought there was going to be one. I thought there was going to be a love triangle. And then and in Raybearer, there were these, I feel like, expectations from the observers of Tarisai and Sanji and Dio,
yeah.
Dio, that, things were happening, and then you subvert it so beautifully. Is that something that you try to do with tropes? Do you play into them? Do you like using them at all? Do you like subverting them? How do tropes work in the Jordan Ifueko style of writing?
I mean, I think that for one thing, I don't think tropes are inherently good or bad. I think tropes are tropes. I think that there are cliches, and those get lazy. And to me, for example, and sometimes even harmful. So to me, like, a trope is something like, okay, a love triangle or enemies to lovers or something like that. And a cliche, especially a harmful cliche, is something like, if there is a Black young man, he has to be impulsive and emotionally unavailable and wants to kill things or all the time, so for example, it's extremely intentional that the most the most forward-facing Black boy in the book is Dio, whose superpower is immense empathy and kindness, to the point where he can unite people from drastically different places, and that he has such empathy and hope in people that it reads as naivety until you get to a certain point in the story in Raybearer, for those who haven't read it, that I won't spoil, when you realize that he actually was not in the dark about the nature of someone at all. He just chose to have faith in them because that's the way he lives his life over and over and over again. Another trope, for example, cliche, is, like if you see South Asian boys and men, a lot of the time they're projected as like nerdy or desexualized or cowardly or something like that. And so I intentionally made like the most like warrior-esque male character in the book coded South Asian, just because it's the danger of a single story, like it's not that there aren't like, really masculine Black men and nerdy South Asian men. It's that, like, if we tell the same story over and over and over, that's dehumanizing. And people want to see themselves portrayed as human, which means three-dimensional and all kinds of people. In terms of tropes, while I don't think there would have been anything wrong with the love triangle, I did really want this book to celebrate all of the different kinds of love that I've found to be formative in my life. As a kid, especially a more sheltered kid, I always thought there was something wrong with me, that I hadn't had like a bunch of romantic drama or boyfriends and all this stuff, like, because the books I was reading, basically it's the same story over and over, where like you'll be living your life and maybe even be like saving the world, but the like relationship that's going to shatter your world and change you is always going to be a romantic one. And for me, the most formative relationships in my life were friendships and siblinghood and things like that. Like, obviously I had a great romantic story. I'm married, and that's awesome. And it's funny, like, I'm going to embarrass David, who's probably watching this, but like both.
I was going to say, is David here? Hold on, let me scroll.
Zuri and Sanjeet are kind of based on David. And so knows. I don't know, he might be working, because I think this event is early enough that he couldn't, but anyway, all that to say, oh gosh, where was I going with that? Right, different kinds of love. So it was so important to me that one of the most formative relationships in the book was between Tarisai and Dio, and their relationship deepens even, a lot in Redemptor. They get a lot of on-page time just working on their relationship, which is completely platonic. They are soulmates in that they know that they need each other to fulfill their callings. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong with physical attraction, I do think that we need more space on the page for all of the different ways that we connect with each other and love each other. And so you have that, deep romantic love between Sanjeet and Tarisai. You have that union and partnership between Dio and Tarisai. You have that soul sisterhood between Tarisai and Kira, and later you see that with kind of Minja and Ailing. In this book, I don't know. I just have always wanted to celebrate all different kinds of love. And I think that's going to be a recurring theme in new things that I write, for sure.
And listen, I'm glad that you brought, or we started talking about Dio, because I feel like, if our books, there is some sort of crossover event, right? I feel like Dio and Tristan would trying so hard to fix this really simple problem and absolutely whiffing, just making it worse. And I feel like Tarisai and Ayana and Gum Baby would just be off to the side, just pinching their nose and rubbing their temples. They do the best. They do their best. And sometimes it just doesn't work.
Thank you so much for bringing up Tristan. If there's anybody in this audience who has not started that series yet, you are so behind. How dare you need to get into it is, every single character is so nuanced, and I love the new life you gave to character archetypes, that a lot of us Black kids especially grew up with, like Brer Rabbit and Brer Wolf. And I don't know why it never occurred to me that Anansi would be extremely annoying to have around. I know the Anansi stories. I know that he's like a trickster and he has this weird ego and all this stuff, and that his kids have to get him out of trouble all the time. But just having him as an app on your phone, I'm just oh my gosh. I wanted Tristan to destroy his phone so many times, punch a hole in the phone.
I feel like similar to what you were talking about with presenting the same story, kind of over and over for different characters or archetypes in this case. We constantly get the trickster tale, and the trickster, he's smarter than everyone else and kind of knows everything. And it's just I know people like that in real life, and they're great people, but sometimes it just get a little bit annoying, right? They're quick to offer a suggestion when you didn't ask for help. And it's regardless, trying to take those kind of established characters and, build around what their core story has always been, and then flesh them out into three-dimensional characters with likes and dislikes and attitudes, and completely, Anansi loves, I believe it's one of Nana's recipes. He's absolutely infatuated with it, right? And it's just giving these very human traits and stuff to characters. I think it makes everyone. It makes people who are familiar, recognize, and maybe grew up with Anansi, it gives them a little bit more closeness with them, and expands that relationship. But also for people who haven't heard of Anansi or anything, I think having that element of relatability encourages empathy and encourages, readers to care about these characters that are on the page.
I love that for some people, their first introduction to Anansi will be through Tristan Strong. That makes me so happy, because I feel like once you're introduced to Tristan Strong's Anansi, reading any of the other actual traditional stories, you just can't get that image out of your head that he's just this whiny, entitled, brilliant, like spider dad.
He's a spider uncle. He's that, you know, great at family reunions and occasional visits, but you know, any longer than that, and it just starts to really grate on your nerves, you know?
Yeah. And real quick, I also wanted to say how I love that one of the driving forces for Tristan, especially in the first book, is grief. You know, grief for a friendship in particular. I was reminded so much of that when I was like bringing up Dio and talking about, you know, the way Black boys are usually represented, if at all, in the single story, and how many, I don't know, that what drove his adventure was his love for his best friend and the loss of him, and trying to like obtain something that was important to his friend that was lost. Yeah.
Well, it's just like you were saying with Tarisai and Dio, and that I feel like we don't really have those conversations enough about the those relationships, those platonic relationships, or those different relationships involving love with family, with friends, and so on and so forth. And that's a disservice that we do to young readers, you know, especially talking about and giving validity to loving your friends, right? Mm-hmm. Caring for them, wanting the best for them, wanting them to excel more than you know, sometimes, right? And you do that so beautifully with Dio and Tarasai. Again, I want to talk about things, but then you brought up the no spoilers for Ray Bear, even though it's been out for a year. No spoilers.
I mean, maybe like just no spoilers for Redemptor.
Listen, you know, Dio gets hurt, and it is Tyrusai's fault. Yes. And even still, he's like, you know what, it's fine. You know, he's like in pain, and he's like, no, you know, we're still friends. I love you. What are you doing? You know, while
actual words are, you missed my heart. And he says this with joy.
Exactly.
And that is the most Dio reaction to being stabbed that you could possibly have.
And I want more of that. I mean, I know you give it to us in Redemptor, but just in general, in books in general, I want more of those expressions of love and joy with our friends, because it is important, right? I think two of my most important therapy, non-licensed therapy, are the two group chats I have with my friends. You know, like there's a saying. I don't know if it's a saying. I'm making it a saying. It's a saying right now. This is now a saying. Like what happens, what you talk about in the group chat stays in the group chat, right? Because, you know, I mean, we're being wild and ridiculous, but also we're talking about things, and we're exposing, you know, parts of ourselves that are raw and potentially like very sensitive, right? Mm-hmm. And you only do that with people who empathize with you, who care about you, and will yank you up short, you know, when you overstep in different areas, right? And I want more of those relationships shown on the page in books, specifically involving, you know, our Black and our marginalized characters, to show how we've had to form those bonds to cope with so much. So you see me, I'm already flagging stuff in Redemptor. And we're gonna talk about one thing before we jump into questions. Okay. But I'm so excited to see more of that relationship of Tarisai and Dio develop in Redemptor, because it is beautiful, it is wonderful. It was unexpected in Ray Bear, and now I am eagerly anticipating it in Redemptor. Quick note to everyone in the audience: if you have questions, drop them in the Ask a Question Otherwise, I will be forced to ask embarrassing questions to Jordan, and nobody wants that. I want it. Y'all don't want that. It's not going to be pretty at all. It'll involve David. So before we get to that possibly embarrassing moment, I just want to talk real briefly. I flagged it about your dedication.
Yes.
And it goes, for young revolutionaries who have chosen the loneliest job in the world. That is your dedication. What prompted that? What made you write that?
I mean, it's funny you bring up David. It's while I've always had this thought and this inclination, like my husband has been doing so much more activism over the past few years against, structural capitalist policies and like how much needs to be changed from the bottom up, like not just like kind of putting band-aids on things, like, he does have a group that goes out and like, feeds homeless people or unhoused people and things like that. But just like recognizing like, no, like everything we accept as status quo in how a society is supposed to take care of its people is vastly inadequate. And it's that old saying, it's like, if when I feed the poor, I get called a saint, and when I ask why we have poor people, I get called a communist. Like it's that, and it's extremely lonely and isolating. And I know that I personally felt that intense loneliness and isolation when I felt that my eyes were slowly being opened as a teenager to all of the things that are just generally accepted in really conservative environments, which I grew up in. A lot of people don't know that like African immigrant parents do tend to be very conservative. And me just questioning and having that gnaw me until finally I realized I could take a stance and challenge these things. And it gets so lonely because I think there's a narrative lately that like, if people don't stand up for the right thing, just like cut them off and they're bad people. And I'm just like, for some of you, that's going to be the people who nourished you and loved you and are invested in you. And that doesn't go away even when you realize that they're supporting structures that are very harmful to people. And so those people who love you will always kind of want you to become to go back to the person you were before, like before you knew all that, before you wanted to change the world in these massive ways. And that creates such a sense of loneliness in you when the people who have been there for you the longest are all of a sudden the people who make you feel the most alienated because of what you now stand for. And you can't unstand for it. You can't go back into your shell and blind yourself to the way the world is. And so, yeah, I think that's why that dedication seems so timely, especially writing this book during what ended up being the largest civil rights movement in history in terms of global participation over this last year with the protests. Yeah, there's so much behind that dedication, but that's the Cliff Notes version of it.
20 words, and yet we can write an essay on what it implies and what it means. So Sapphire Dragon asks, how involved were you with the covers for Raybear and Redemptor? Is this Jordan? Hold on, wait, let me hold it. Is this?
No, it is not. Although she is a dead ringer for this South African actress named Tricia Mpisi, who I sent a copy of the book because she looks just like her, like it's uncanny. Anyway, the art covers are done by the fabulous artist Charles Chazon. And I did have some input. Abrams, at least in my experience with my publisher, Abrams Books, of which Amulet is an imprint, they were very open to hearing like what I would like, what things were really important to me to have or not have. One thing I specified is like, look, if you're going to have a face on the cover, if you're going to have a Black girl on the cover, she needs to be as dark or darker than me. Because you just learn really early as an American Black girl that if you want to have any visibility, you're supposed to be several shades lighter, curl pattern looser, ideally with like green or gray eyes, you know, just like abject colorism. And I was just like, nope, she's going to be dark. And in this book, her darkness is never, ever, ever going to be a source of anxiety or you know, like basically she's only ever revered. When it happens to be brought up, it's to say things like, oh, look, there's a blue blood. They're the most privileged in our society because like they're that dark. Like I reinvent the word blue blood to mean like skin so black, it's almost blue. And they're like the wealthiest in the capital. So that was one thing. She has very clear Jackson 5 nostrils, a Negro nose. And it took forever for a lot of people to realize that this isn't Sky, it's her hair, which, you know, I understand the confusion because it actually has stars in it. Each of these like different color patterns here, they're actually fabrics, loosely based on the fabrics that the realms are coded to in their real world equivalents. So you see you got a bit of Kente, I think here, and like some, and for the oh gosh, I'm forgetting the names of my own kingdoms. King Kwazi is from Nyamba, yes, which is loosely based on pre-colonial Ghana. And yeah, so you have Kente for him. You have like plaid for like the kind of Gaelic coded places. You have there should be some Adire cloth for like the Yoruba. So that's really cool. And then in contrast here, all of these are just like sprites and glyphs and patterns to represent the map for the underworld that's growing on Tare-Sai's skin. And I liked how moody and dark this cover was because this really kind of shows the mental progression Tare-Sai has. Like she's waking up to her identity and the beauty of the world. And then in this one, she's struggling with, you know, the depths to which structures need to be challenged and changed in this book.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. I love that progression. It reminds me, you can just see Tristan 2 right here. I don't have a big blow up of Tristan 2, but the progression of the covers that go from like the sky just before sunset to evening time.
Yeah.
And it also
in my head. That's awesome because I noticed.
Damian Jackson asks, what brings you joy about writing?
So many different aspects. Some of it is like that weird, I can't describe it as anything but a flow state, but it doesn't happen to me very often. Some writers talk about like this as if, you know, it happens to them all the time and power to them. But for me, it's very rare and very special when I get so involved in a chapter in a work that I'll look down and like 6 hours will have passed. You know, I've done that before where I started writing at 9 and then like looked up and saw that like the sun was rising, you know, and Kwame knows very much that I
do. I do. Yes. We're in a group chat together and I'll see her pop up and I'm like, go to bed. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yes. But that does tend to be when my imagination comes alive. I'm trying to become more of a day writer just because it helps David and I's schedules sync up more. This is completely a tangent, but I just want to shout out David and say that there have been times where he'll get up for water in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., you know, and I'll just be there like an owl over my laptop. I'll say nothing to him except like, I can't figure out why Zuri does this thing. And David, bless his heart, will just stand there and then he'll sit down and be like, okay, what was Zuri's motivation in the last chapter? Just he's used to it, man. Shout out
to the critique partners that started off as spouses.
Yes, exactly. My mother-in-law is here, I see, so I'm sure she can corroborate. But all that to say, I really love the flow state, but I also love that moment when you learn something and know that you're going to put it in a story because it's just too delicious. I love that. Right now I'm listening to a Great Courses audiobook. I don't know whether or not I'd recommend them just because once I started listening, I realized more that they were like recorded lectures rather than like really well done audiobooks, but you still learn a lot. And I'm listening to one on the great cities of the world for another book that I'm writing, which is currently set partially in Oluwan City. It's not the same protagonist, but it's in the same world as Raybearer. And just learning about how things we accept in cities got started. Like, it's just like, it never occurred to me to ask like, oh, okay, like when would roads get paved? When would something like a sidewalk or a high rise become like practical? What drew people to cities in general? Why would you choose to live in a city rather than like a family clan where you know everybody? You know, I love learning things like that. And so, yeah, that's a really great part of writing. Let's see. I still am overwhelmed to tears whenever a kid like finds me on the internet, like just to tell me how much they loved the book. There's nothing like it. It's just so earnest and it's that never gets old. And it never feels trite, like, oh, another one. No, every single one is just a gift. And I always see them, like, I always just imagine some kid individually deciding to like stop playing TikTok or Among Us or whatever the youths do right now.
The youths. Listen, TikTok is single-handedly making me a better chef, so I'm not gonna. Oh,
there's a talk for everybody.
Absolutely.
There are areas of my house that are cleaner than they have been probably in 50 years because of cleaning talk. I'm just like,
listen, clean talk. Like, I've got so many tricks. Like, my shower is immaculate because of clean talk. Real quick, are you plotter or a pantser?
Both.
Both.
I'm a plotter, and then I end up not using any of the thing that I planned out before, or very little of it. So I'll try and be good and plan it in advance, and then I will write whatever I wanted to write at the moment. And that means that I'll write like hundreds of thousands of words that never make it into the book.
So you are a plantser. Excellent.
Yes, a plantser. There we go.
Scrivener or Word?
Word. Although I've thought of Scrivener seems like just what I need for organization. The main enormous failing of Scrivener for me is that you can only use it on your laptop. And for me, because of the way my mind works, I have to be able to write on different platforms. Like, that's why I like Google Docs, is like, if I get an idea, I can whip out my phone and add it to the manuscript because it's also on my phone. It's a Google Doc cloud file. Whereas Scrivener, or like, you know, on my iPad or whatever I'm using at the moment. Wait, what? What? I was told Scrivener couldn't do that. You're single-handedly changing. Like,
whoever told you that? Listen, I'm the biggest Scrivener like proselytizer out here. I have Scrivener on my iPhone, on my iPad, on my Mac, and on my PC.
That's insane. I had no idea I could use Scrivener on my phone. Different people told me. I wonder if they have like older versions.
I mean, it's been out for a while. So I mean, but I've had it on my phone for at least 4 or 5 years, maybe. Maybe 3. But it's been several years.
It, like, after this session, like, that's the main thing that kept me from doing it.
Yes. How many times has Word crashed on you with your full document open? Ooh, the fact that you have to count.
We agreed that this was going to be a happy time. Google Docs has done that too. Google Docs will do that, or it'll do this really fun prank on you where it'll load up the document and all like 200 plus pages of your novel will be there, but it'll be blank. It'll just be like a 200 blank document, and you're just, you know, sweating bullets until like the words decide to load. But for a good while, it's just like, it erased my entire book.
My last like craft question: are you do you edit as you go, or are you a word vomiter?
Edit as I go, and that's why it's funny. I say I'm a slow writer, but what that basically means is I write less than 1,000 words a day because I edit over and over and over what I've already written. But what that means is that my editing process is actually generally kind of painless. Usually my editing process involves writing new content that needed to be there or taking out stuff. It doesn't usually involve editing the meat of what I decide to keep, because I've already like fine-combed it in terms of phrasing and I try and get it in a pretty good place.
Now, what about structurally? Like, do you have to revise for that, or is that something that you also edit as you go?
I definitely have to revise for structure, but I do think less so than like the word vomit approach, because one of the reasons why cutting things or moving things is very difficult for me. I do it all the time, but the way I tend to write is to interweave references to things that just happened. So if I move a scene, then all of the references that I put to that scene have to also be moved. And so that can get a bit maddening. But I think with Redemptor, I had to do so much more conscious like I know the like official terms that I learned as an English major are like plot structure and acts and things like that. I generally actually don't consciously think of those things because I read so much growing up that I learned how to do that by osmosis. Like the only way I know how to write stories are the way stories kind of felt to me reading so many growing up. It's like, okay, things need to start simmering up here and simmering down here. That feels really organic to me. I don't generally think of like, now I'm writing act 2 or something like that.
Really quickly, as a reader, do you ever find yourself like something major happens and you're like, you open up and you're like, am I at the midpoint of the book or something? Like, is this, or am I 80% of the way through? And this is like, do you ever find yourself like employing your writer brain and you're like looking at your reader brain, like, don't spoil it for me. Like,
well, I mean, absolutely. One of the worst feelings in the world, is when the romantic couple or the romantic interests have their beautiful connection moment in the beginning or the middle of the book. Because you know that they're going to have like that third or fourth act breakup. Because I'm just like, nope, it's too early. It's too early for you to be happy. It's going to be too bad. The fight is coming. The betrayal or ridiculous misunderstanding is coming.
I gotta write. That's going to be the quote that I'm going to tweet. It's too early in the book for you to be happy.
Yes.
Quote Jordan Ifueko. I'm gonna need that in fancy calligraphy and a book plate. That's what that's gonna be.
I was kind of Tarisai and Sanjeet have their spat middle-ish of book 2, so you know that I'm good for the happy ending later. I guess that's a spoiler that I don't just like kill them off or whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't do that to you.
No, you better not. It is 5:59. Jordan. Thank you. Well, yeah, 5. I keep forgetting you're on the East Coast time right now. I keep having to like check the conversions. Thank you so much for letting me hang out with you and pick your writerly brain so that I could become better as a writer, and all of us here.
This was awesome, and I think the last time I saw you, you were doing the voice of an old man for Namina's book in the live reading. So it's good to actually get to spend time with you as Kwame.
Was it an old woman, or was it an old man or an old woman?
Old man. You were the father. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I had to put my fatherly voice on there.
Yes.
All right, we're going to turn it over to the lovely Jenny of our wonderful host for this evening.
Well, thank you both for the lovely conversation. It was great. I learned a lot. I could listen to you talk for much longer. And it's so awesome. It's always awesome to hear authors who are clearly friends talking to each other about what they love and about books that they love. I don't know. Kwame apparently did not like the
It's
friends. Well, I don't know. You're in a group chat.
Ask who posts often in the group chat though, and who shows up like once every 3 weeks. Hey guys, at 2 a.m.
All right.
Yep.
I guess you guys will have to work that out then. You came off as friends, we'll say. But thank you for joining us this Saturday. I know, there's lots you could do with your weekend and you are spending it with us. And so thank you to everybody who came. Again, if you would like to order a personalized book plate from Jordan for Ray Bear, you can follow the link just below us. And it's wonderful. I love both of these books. I tried to ask a question that didn't get to but I couldn't write it without spoilers anyway, so it's kind of a bad question.
You know why I didn't ask the question is because I was like, I'm not spoiling it for me because I haven't gotten to that part yet. So I'm not asking that question, Jenny.
Well, I like the crocodile and the relationship between Tarisai and the crocodile. We'll just leave it there.
I'm not listening.
All right. Well, everybody have a lovely weekend. Thank you for coming. And that is my really suave ending. But thank you all. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.